Hey everyone, welcome back to Strange Mind 6. I'm your host, Ruby, and today we're going to be reading more of Spooky Creepy Long Island. This time we're going to be reading Chapter 5 and Chapter 6 because Chapter 5 is very short, so I wanted to read Chapter 6 as well to at least give you guys a longer video. But before we begin, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And without further ado, my dear friends, grab a snack, grab a drink, or just sit back and relax, and let's get to it. Chapter 5. The Mill Hill Windmill of Southampton College. Eastern Long Island boasts the largest surviving collection of windmills in the United States, 11 in all. It still seems a small collection. Aside from remaining as charmingly picturesque decoration on the horizon, windmills served as valuable labor-saving devices, helping with grinding corn and grain, sawing wood, and pumping water. Known historically as the Mill Hill Windmill, it originally stood at Southampton Village. It's been known as the Mill Hill Windmill, the Tucker Mill, and the College Mill, and was the symbol of Southampton College. The Southampton College Windmill sits atop of knoll overlooking Shinnecock Hills and offers views of Shinnecock Bay, the Great Peconic Bay, and the Atlantic Ocean. The three-story gray shingled windmill was built in 1712 and served the community faithfully for over 100 years. In 1890, in response to advances in technology, the windmill fell into disuse. Captain Tommy Warren, the last of the mill operator, intended to tear down the windmill and replace it with a barn. Mrs. William S. Hoyt, the daughter of Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of the Navy, Salmon P. Chase, had fallen in love with the windmill and purchased it in 1890 to prevent the destruction of the charming historical landmark. A team of horses pulled the windmill to its current location on her property, where Mrs. Hoyt used the windmill as a tea room and playhouse. 6 years later, in 1896, wealthy textile manufacturer Arthur B. Claflin bought the Hoyt estate, and the windmill became a guest cottage. An interesting footnote in the history of the windmill: during its incarnation as a guest house was that it was home to playwright Tennessee Williams for a summer, who reportedly enjoyed his stay very much and said that it was one of the most creatively inspired summers of his career as a playwright. Claflin's daughter, Beatrice, loved to play in the windmill, but her affinity for the quaint playhouse was unjustly rewarded. Legend relates that while playing in the windmill, she fell down the steep stairs and broke her neck, dying instantly from her injuries. While owned by the college, the windmill was used as a social center, a residence for visiting faculty, and a small lecture room. Students reported that the young girl's spirit haunts the windmill, her innocent face peering from its windows. Since she was a child when she died, only her head and shoulders are seen. The apparition follows passerbyers, from window to window as they walk by, and sometimes an indistinct voice calls out to them. The windmill emanates an eerie vibe, but the students felt that the spirit of the little girl was just lonely and looking for a playmate. The windmill still stands alone atop its hill, and visitors are encouraged to visit and keep a lonely little girl company. Chapter 6. The Chilling Legend of Reid's Ice Cream Warehouse. Reid's Ice Cream Warehouse was located in Blue Point, Long Island. It was a warehouse used to store ice cream from Reid's Ice Cream, a brand manufactured in Brooklyn, New York. The warehouse was reportedly closed down in the 1920s and remained standing in a gradually worsened state of neglect and disrepair until its deconstruction in 2003. To make room for the spread of urban sprawl, as a new residential neighborhood was built on the ice cream warehouse's former location. There are two urban legends that surrounded the abandoned ice cream warehouse. The more popular legend is about a nightclub, a man, and a woman. A deadly meeting. In the early 1950s, there was a nightclub called the Herrmann in nearby Bayport. It was a popular destination back in those days. A local girl, the only name the legends give her is Linda, accepted a job as a dancer there. One night, she made the questionable decision to accept an invitation from one of the club's patrons, agreeing to meet him in the parking lot after she got off of work. It's said that she said goodbye to one of the other dancers as she got into his car later that fateful night. The man drove them to the ice cream factory, a secluded spot that was perfect for them to be alone together. At this point, the path of the legends forks. One account says she hesitated in allowing his eager advances, and when she objected, her lover persisted. A crime of lust. He R'd, or SA if you want to say, her, and ended her life, leaving her lifeless body on the property of the ice cream warehouse. Another account maintains that the couple was absorbed in amorous activity when a third person attacked them. The man was murdered outright and the girl was essayed and tortured to death with a straight razor. Her body was found on the factory's property the next day, while her lover's body was never found again. Some say they have heard a woman screaming and crying and claim to have seen a ghostly woman walking across the abandoned property. One account even reports the ghost wandering across the street, startling innocent motorists. Sometimes the apparition seems quite real, while she wanders the scene of her violation and murder. In one extreme version of the account, the phantom walks towards her victims, tilting her head to the side so they can see her savage wounds inflicted upon her. Then, just when it feels like the nightmarish vision is close enough to reach out and touch the person, she vanishes into thin air. The other legend regarding the abandoned ice cream warehouse is concerning a young boy who supposedly died there. As with many urban legends, the finer details of the legends differ. One version maintains that sometime in the 1970s, a little boy was playing in the abandoned ice cream factory, playing on or around an old piece of machinery. He either fell to his death on the factory floor or was injured by the ruined machinery and died from his injuries. Scared and alone inside an abandoned ice cream warehouse, the other version maintains that the little boy had a mental illness or was special needs, and that he would play on the railroad tracks, and one of those times, for whatever reason, he failed to move out of the way of an oncoming train. Either way, there was those who claim to have explored the warehouse before its destruction, and while exploring, they reportedly hearing laughter, humming, singing, and pitter-patting of small feet echoing through the main room. Renewed hope for abandoned building. It was believed that an unexplained fire was supposedly responsible for destroying the original building. Repairs were planned, but more mysterious fires followed each time an attempt to rebuild was set in motion. The owners of the property eventually gave up their plans to rebuild. They boarded up the factory and abandoned it to the vicissitudes of time. Contrary to popular belief, the factory may have been boarded up, but it was not abandoned. In a local newspaper report dating from 1992, the factory was reported to be owned and cared for. There was even mention of plans for renewed construction permits, which seemed to have been stalled for several years. In December of 2002, for sale signs went up on the old factory, and by January, demolition was finally set into motion. While Reid's was still intact, local investigators went to visit the site, and there were some contractors looking at the site. The contractors would not tell the visitors what their purpose for being there was, but once the visitors began relating the legends attributed to the site, one of the contractors said that explained what happened to them earlier. Okay, I get it. One of the contractors that said that explained what happened to them earlier. It wasn't worded correctly. Earlier in the morning, while they were setting up, the large, heavy loading dock door began to shake. It became more violent and impossible to ignore. One of the contractors went outside to check, and there were no trains passing, nor was there any wind. After a while, and without explanation, it stopped shaking. One perhaps would think that with the deconstruction of the long-abandoned ice cream warehouse, its phantoms would disperse into the ether. But a chilling account related by a man who was unaware of the legend brings into question the longevity of the ghostly residents of this place. The man reports that while riding his bike around his neighborhood, he accidentally found himself among an area where new homes were being constructed. While in this area, he encountered a ghost of a woman. As chilling as an encounter with the otherworldly may usually seem, the appearance of this apparition was particularly frightening because her eyes should have been instead Because of where her eyes should have been, instead, there were wide black holes which seemed to recede into eternity. And that is the end of chapter 6, my dear friends. Tune in next video for chapter 7, The Poltergeist of Herrmann House. This has been Ruby, signing off, my dear friends. Actually, we can read chapter 7 as well. Chapter 7, The Poltergeist of Herrmann House. In the Seaford, Long Island, house of Air France employee James Herrmann and his family, inanimate objects seem to take a life of their own. The events began February 3rd, 1958. At approximately 3:30 p.m., bottles of liquid starch, bleach, nail polish, perfume, shampoo, hair tonic, prescription medication bottles, and even holy water spontaneously unscrewed their caps and toppled over. The manifestations initially came in short spurts, usually just 1 or 2 manifestations a day, but later that month the manifestations grew in frequency and violence. James Herrmann watched a bottle of medicine hop at least 6 inches across the bathroom vanity into the sink. Herrmann's wife, Lucille, actually saw one bottle spin off its top, turn on the shelf, and fall to the floor. The Herrmanns gave their poltergeist the nickname Popper. The Herrmanns weren't the only ones to witness the poltergeist. In fact, the Herrmann house poltergeist continues to this day as the most thoroughly investigated and documented poltergeist haunting in history. A detective assigned by the Nassau County Police Department to investigate the unusual events also witnessed the phenomena. Twice, when hearing noises in nearby an unoccupied room, the detective rushed to see if he could discover the cause for the noises. Once he discovered that a sugar bowl in the dinette had flipped 3 feet, and another time, in the son's bedroom, a chest of drawers had tipped over and the boy's record player was spinning around the room. During the same investigation, a reporter from Newsday reported that he heard a crash from the unoccupied living room, and they discovered that a porcelain figurine of a colonial man had been thrown 10 feet across the living room, smashing it into pieces against a wooden desk. The figurine was hurled with such force that it had dented the wooden desk. 15 minutes later, hoping to see one of the events, he positioned himself on the living room couch facing Jimmy's darkened bedroom. Suddenly, a 10-inch cardboard globe, silently spinning, hurtled out of Jimmy's room and down a hallway, narrowly missing the detective investigating the house for possible explanations, and bounced into the opposite corner of the living room. A bottle of ink flew from the dining room table and smashed against the front door, spattering everything in the vicinity of its impact. A sugar bowl suddenly lifted off the kitchen table and crashed to the floor, and a British photographer saw one of his flash bulbs levitate from an end table. A neighbor suggested that vibrations from an underground stream might be causing the movements, and the Air Force thought that the vibrations from overhead jets were to blame. But a vibration detector set up by the Long Island Lightning Company found nothing out of the ordinary. Technicians from RCA, covering most of the radio spectrum, were unable to detect any abnormal signals. The head of Hempstead Town Building Department detected no defects in the 5-year-old house, in which only the Herrmanns had lived. After the Nassau County Police Department admitted to being unable to find any logical explanation, Duke University had its premier parapsychologists investigate the extraordinary events. The Duke parapsychologists originally thought that the manifestations were caused by psychokinetic energy generated by the teenagers, in particularly the Herrmann's 13-year-old son, Jimmy. Their reason was that children are often at the center point of poltergeist activity, especially adolescent children going through the changes that accompany puberty. But since many of the odd events occurred when the children were not home, the theory that the children were the cause of the paranormal activity was ruled out. 67 uncanny incidents occurred inside the troubled house before the unusual events suddenly ceased. On March 2, 1958, the Duke University parapsychology team produced a 45-page study in detail the inexplicable phenomena, excerpts of which have been published in almost every book on poltergeist activity. The report is on file at the university. Now this is where we will stop. At Chapter 8, the Massapequa Hell House. Tune in next time, my dear, dear friends, to listen to this story. This has been Ruby, signing off.